Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott, back as always. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is we have special guest Logan Wilkinson joining the podcast once again. How you doing, Logan?
Doing fantastic.
Excellent. Yeah, Logan is here because he is avoiding some law school finals prep and wanted to sit down and chat movies. In particular, we're going to be talking The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare that just came out, and Monkey Man. And then Cameron is going to be talking about his thoughts on Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. And I sat down and played Tales of Kenzera Zao this weekend. So we got a big jam-packed episode of a number of items for you. So if any of those appeal to you more than others, we'll have the timestamps in the description below. Before we hop in, Logan, tell me, your goal this year is 100 movies. You want to watch 100 movies. Is that 100 movies in theaters or just 100 movies that you haven't seen before?
Yeah, so just 100 different movies.
Okay.
So yeah, during the probably from 2016 onwards, maybe even before that, I obviously was more into, my love for movies kind of subsided a little bit. And then the pandemic happened and just sort of broke everything, right? But from 2021 onwards, and especially after we watched all the Bond movies, I've just that reignited my love for obviously Bond, but also just movies at large. And so I watched the most movies I had in theaters in 2022 that I had in years. And then last year I did even more. And then this year, it wasn't even necessarily initially the goal. The goal was just to watch more movies in theaters this year than last year. But then over time and during everything happened, and during spring break, we talked about the fact that I watched 9 movies during spring break, right? And I was like, you know what? It's doable, right? So it evolved to, just watching 100 different movies. 2 of the movies I've seen, I'm at 34 right now. 2 of the movies I've technically seen before, but it's been years, so I'm counting that, right? But I've seen 34 different movies so far this year. Obviously, April will be a third of the way through the year, so I just need to be at roughly 33, so I'm actually on pace for that. I watched 15 in March alone. I've watched 11 this month, so that's the goal. I'm using Letterboxd basically daily, and just adding in all the movies I've seen throughout my life, trying to find them all. I'm up to 975 movies I've logged on Letterboxd.
Are you doing reviews for all of them, little blurbs, or just the
Great question. So any of the movies that I've seen this year, I'm actually reviewing and doing diary entries for, right? The movies, older movies kind of thing, I'm just saying, I've seen it. And then for some of them, I'm giving them stars, but most of them just saying, I've seen it, and that's it, right? And so that's how I get to 975. I'm just being I've seen these movies to log them in. Shout out to 2003 and 4, where I've seen 50 movies from those 2 years. So thriving in cinema back when I was 12. But yeah, it kind of evolved into this more ambitious goal of let's see if I can watch 100 movies this year. And so that sort of takes us back into all the different movies I've seen this year.
I'll be curious.
A broad spectrum.
I'll be curious how the year kind of shakes out, especially because I think we're going to start seeing the effects of last year's strikes. So we're going to see a bit of a drought in movies this year, probably. But I imagine you'll have to supplement the summer months because there won't be as many blockbusters, and there won't be as many. Not that you tend to go make your way out to those anyway, but those being the ones that usually dominate the box office in the summer months, it feels like we're going to have way less of those, with really Deadpool being the only thing on the Marvel front, nothing really on the DC side of things this year. But then I imagine you'll have you'll be one of those people that is just trying to keep up with awards movies in the fall. Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting breakdown right now, even, right? Because one of the things that I found really exciting about, and again, we can blame James Bond for this, but one of the things I found really exciting this year in particular, where I was I just want to see 100 movies, is only out of the 34 movies I've seen this year, I think only 7, only 7 are 2024 releases.
Okay.
So there are other 7 or so are older movies, and the range is literally like a century, right? Like I've definitely been watching some Connery movies because obviously I love Sean Connery, his biggest fan, but that's led to like fun stuff, right? Like Sean Connery he had a adaptation of The Great Train Robbery that he did. And while looking at the Wikipedia page for his entry, it then obviously linked to the original like 1903 like silent film Great Train Robbery, which is only 12 minutes long, and the entire film was on Wikipedia. And so I was like, well, might as well while I'm here, right? It's like I watched a movie from 1903, right? I've watched, like Stagecoach, like John Wayne's first big breakout movie from the 1930s, right? And then I've watched, The Maltese Falcon last night, right, from 41, and like classic film, like classic film noir. And I've also watched like Robert Altman movies from the 70s, and then juxtaposed with that is, during spring break I bought a 4 set of Kurosawa films, right, and watched and watch like Seven Samurai and Yojimbo, right, and like those kind of classic things. And then I've watched a lot of like Bollywood and Tollywood movies. I've watched like South Korean action films. And so like one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this year in particular is that because I'm just sort of like, I want to watch 100 movies, it has opened me up to just watching. I mean, Kurosawa I'm always down to watch, but like some of the other ones I might not have, right? And so it's been kind of a fun experience of just watching random things that are on Amazon Prime or Peacock, right, or whatever it might be. And yeah, that's made it like a really broader spectrum of things that I'm actually getting to watch.
That's there are flavors and hints of that remind me of would have been like 2016, 2017, whenever like MoviePass really like kind of
100%
like flew too close to the sky or to the sun and then like crashed. Like I got in there when MoviePass was like when they were like $10 a month, unlimited movies, and then that was unsustainable for them. So like 4 months in, they basically started like adding all sorts of restrictions on it. But in those first 3 months, I still saw a ton of stuff that I would not have seen otherwise. Be it like
shout out to Doolittle.
Yeah, shout out to Doolittle, or like Atomic Blonde. I saw and really enjoyed. There was another Charlize Theron movie that is escaping me, but like basically she was like a very stressed out mother where she was going through some stuff that I ended up like really enjoying, that I would never have like bothered with if because that was it wasn't a summer blockbustery kind of thing. I've never been enough of a movie person to kind of do I'm going to go back and go through like, the history of film and stuff. I like when you were like, so I watched a movie from 1903. I was like, that is probably older than any movie I've ever watched. But then I was like, wait, no, I watched like the Potemkin films, the Potemkin film in college for like one of my classes, which is like features the first montage, and that's why I was watching it. So yeah, like I've seen a couple of like very old things, but it was always for like academic reasons, never out of like personal enjoyment or whatever.
One of my favorite things is to ask people what's the oldest movie they've ever seen, and usually you get a lot of like if they're not like super big in movies, you get a lot of responses from like, oh, like I saw like something from like 1970 or maybe something from 1960, and then I always just ask like, well, have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz, right, or Snow White? Because then suddenly you're in the 1930s now, right, and so easily, right, and like if you ever took a film class, you almost certainly saw Birth of the Nation, right, and so now you're at like 1915, right, and so
I watched Gone with the Wind in
right, so
in
you're
high
in the
school.
1930s again, right, and so it's people have seen older movies than they think they have, right, without even realizing it. Because like movies have always been like my favorite storytelling medium, right? Like there was a time in the 2010s where it kind of got more neck and neck with obviously video games, but I think there's just something to movies, and A, they're quicker to get through usually, but B, I just think there's something to how old they are in a way that games just don't quite have yet, obviously, because they're just newer by their nature of what they are. And so it's also fun to kind of see the arc of how movies have evolved, which is something that we talked a lot about when we did Bond, right? Is that like you can trace the arc of blockbuster movies and action films and adventure movies, and just the like cinematic techniques evolving over the course of a 60-year film franchise, right? And so it's fun to kind of go back through all the various movies that I've kind of seen this year as well.
Yeah, I think I think the like oldest movie that I've probably watched just like out of my own pure interest was probably like something from Charlie Chaplin. Like I have a collection of Charlie Chaplin films because I got like really into him when I was in college and stuff. In particular, like when doing like movement classes, one of my big movement professors who did stage combat with me was also a professional mime. And like one of the, you know, renowned mimes in the country and stuff. And so he kind of like introduced us to a lot of like Charlie Chaplin physical stuff. And I was like, I really like this. I want to go back and like check out some of this stuff. So going back and like watching some of those early things, or like I've probably got some like very early like Shakespeare films, like early adaptations of those that I've
like
probably
Laurence Olivier
watched
kind of stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a like. It was fascinating when we did that Bond show, going back to those early ones and being like, oh yeah, these are movies that exist before we landed on the moon and stuff like that. And just being like, yeah,
literally.
I probably have not watched a ton of movies that are like pre-Star Wars. And yeah, like some of the examples you highlighted, yes, I've watched those, but yeah, it like I still, you know, never seen The Godfather as my, you know, that whole thing that always gets you. You know, why start now? Anyway,
a good point. There you go.
With all of that fun kind of just movie banter out of the way, let's dive into the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and like, you know, one of the most modern movies that you could have seen. What do you think of this one?
Literally like 2 weeks old. I think it's a ton of fun, right? So I'm a sucker for Guy Ritchie. I like his stylings a lot, and his kind of like working class British style of like humor and action, I think, and dialogue. I mean, Henry Cavill's great, right?
Henry Cavill is the thing that gets me to almost want to go out and see this movie.
Yeah,
and then I'm like, but I don't really want to go out and watch a movie right now. But like the combination of Henry Cavill and Guy Ritchie is like that's a fun mix. And that's like, especially in the camp of like, oh, I would love to see a Henry Cavill Bond type movie. It's like, oh, this would be a very interesting version of Bond.
Yeah, let me also make a couple of inquiries here, because is this about the also, I want to ask a question real quick. Side note: how good is Alan Richardson doing a British accent in this movie?
No, so Alan Richardson is playing a Swede in the movie.
Okay, how's his Swedish accent?
So he doesn't talk in Swedish that much. He basically does like he's basically a Swedish person trying to do an English accent. But it's a lot of fun. He in particular is one of the actual highlights of the entire film for me. His character feels like it's out of a Tarantino movie almost.
Interesting. So, but my actual question was: is this like the thing based off of the organization in World War II that is like the famed MI6 like origin story? Like this is like the who's the guy who Alan Fleming, like Alan Fleming's cousin was a member of this. Ian Fleming's cousin was a member of this organization and is like the basis of James Bond.
So it's really funny you mentioned this, and it's really funny Trevor mentioned Bond as well, because Ian Fleming's in this movie.
Oh, okay.
He's a member of the cast. Yeah, and the movie, because the movie's based on a real story that was like declassified documents in like 2016 or 17, it says. But what's funny is that like Henry Cavill's character was an inspiration for James Bond that Ian Fleming would create, basically. So like, because Henry Cavill's character is a real person who really did like all these like undercover missions and was just kind of a rogue and a renegade and that kind of stuff. And Ian Fleming used it as a basis for James Bond, and that's referenced in the movie itself. So it's kind of funny. It's interesting because I didn't know any of that going into the movie. And then like Ian Fleming was just there and was like, is that Ian Fleming right now? What's happening here? And then like the end credits very much say like he was a direct inspiration. along with Christopher Lee.
I was about to ask. I was like, is Christopher Lee in the movie?
Because Christopher Lee's not in the movie, but he was. Christopher Lee is obviously Eiyuden Fleming's cousin in real life and did a lot of like crazy shit during World War II and was also an inspiration for Bond, which made it even better that Christopher Lee was a Bond villain.
Well, Christopher Lee is, like, according to like records and stuff, was a member of this organization. So
yes, but he's not in the movie.
But he's not in the. Okay, I was disappointed to see that. I'm like, dang it. Because like one of the best like trivias of all time is from A Return of the King, where Peter Jackson's like, yeah, you're gonna fall off and scream, and he goes, if I get stabbed in the back this way, it's going through my lungs, I'm not screaming. And he goes, no, but for the movie, he goes, I know the effect that being stabbed in the back like this has on a person. I wouldn't scream. And that's a moment where Peter Jackson remembered, like, oh yeah, Christopher Lee has killed men.
Yeah, I saw that meme going around the other day of like, have you killed a man? With Christopher Lee talking to him.
Yeah, Peter Jackson. It's like it's straight up just like, yeah, no, this is where I got interested. I was like, if Christopher Lee's in this movie, I'm gonna see it hands down. So I'm a little sad that he's not.
No, Christopher Lee's not in it, unfortunately. But
do you think it's because they wouldn't believe it if they're like, oh, this is Christopher Lee?
I don't know. It's. I mean, I didn't expect Eiyuden Fleming to show up, so and the direct inspiration it takes there. I understand that I like the movie a lot. Let me just go back to that. I really like the movie a lot. I gave it a 4 out of 5 in Letterboxd. I think it's a ton of fun. I understand people's complaint that the movie's a lot of just 4 guys sailing and then stuff is happening outside of what they're doing, but I don't care because the stuff that's happening while they're sailing is a ton of fun, and the final like action set piece is really great. It's got like a diabolically, deliciously evil Nazi villain at the heart of the thing, which how can you not love watching Nazis just get absolutely destroyed by Alan Richardson in particular, who likes to use like melee weapons. Henry Cavill's like kind of completely unhinged and is an asshole, but it's like a slightly charming one and is like a lot of fun to watch. Henry Golden's in here as well as like the explosives expert. So he's also really great and fantastic. Like Winston Churchill's in the movie multiple times, like that character. Like it's just a really silly, fun, goofy movie that doesn't take itself too seriously and also understands something that the best Indiana Jones movies do, which is there's just no better movie villain than Nazis. Mm-hmm. Because you can just make them cartoonishly evil, except for it's not cartoonishly evil. They're just that evil and just have like so much fun with it, right? And yeah, I think it has elements of almost like an Ocean's movie at times, with like the coordinated aspect of everything kind of going off without a hitch or not. I think the dialogue is very clever and funny and quippy, like you'd expect from a Guy Ritchie movie. And it is, to me, and Trevor in particular will know what I'm about to say here when I say this, the perfect Sunday afternoon movie to just throw on, and you're going to have a great time for 2 hours. Like, it's a very quick, like, this movie does not labor on any point for too long at all. It is, you're marching through this whole thing and just having a great time throughout it. And I love Henry Cavill's look in it. I love Henry Golden in it. And like I said, Alan Richardson in particular is in a lot of ways the star of the entire movie for me. And yeah, I just think it's pretty great. And is my second favorite movie of the year that's come out so far now.
How, I mean, and maybe this just speaks to what your experience level is, I guess. How does it stack up to other Guy Ritchie films?
Great.
Because that's a really good question, because a lot of the strength of Guy Ritchie is the working class background, like kind of like his gangster movies and everything. How does he deal with the gentleman level of aspect of this?
So it's interesting because Henry Cavill's character is sort of kind of working, like I got the vibe that he's sort of more working class anyway. And he's not very like posh by any means. But he sort of has a lot of fun interactions with the more posh characters that sort of surround him. Right. So, I mean, I think, just kind of quickly pulling up Guy Ritchie's collection of like films here. I liked The Gentleman quite a bit, but I had some big issues with the narrative design in that one, so I like this more than The Gentleman. I wasn't the biggest Sherlock Holmes fans from Guy Ritchie, so I like it more than that. We don't even need to get into Aladdin. King Arthur, so like quickly looking at his thing, I would say to me this is in him just like pure fun entertainment right there with like Snatch, right? As like maybe my favorite Guy Ritchie movie. Like it's really just such a good time. And it is such a fun mix of like a couple of different mashups. Like it feels like there are very heavy influences like an Indiana Jones film here, but there's also like Tarantino-esque like villains and like side characters, and it's very kind of silly at times, but bloodily silly, right? Yeah, so I think it's really great, and it's maybe my favorite Guy Ritchie movie, if right below Snatch, which is really, really great. So I'm very happy with it. Again, it's ahead of Dune Part 2 for me for the year.
Yeah, there you go.
So
and then because the other Henry Cavill spy movie this year was Argyle.
Argyle, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I also saw.
Significantly better than Argyle? Or maybe not significantly, but easily better than Argyle.
I can't remember if we talked about Argyle or not. I definitely feel like I had a conversation. Okay, so the thing with Argyle is that it is like 2/3 of a good movie. Not great, but 2/3 of a good movie. And then the last third is just...
Messy.
It doesn't so much go off the rails, like completely derail and smash through a village. It just totally like loses the plot. And so this one sticks its landing so much
they
better.
Moonraker it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to use that from now on. I love that. Yeah. And so I think this one both A, sticks its landing, and B, I think understands that sometimes a like 11th hour plot twist for the sake of an 11th hour plot twist doesn't actually serve anything and can sort of detract from the whole thing, right? Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much this movie is going. Like, it does not really stop to linger. Like, you're moving, and so it sort of teases a potential, like, oh, what's going to happen here? And then it wraps it up super quick, and it's like, you know what? We're better for this being wrapped up quickly and not having to do another, like, 10 minutes of what's going to happen here, right? Like, it is very much marching to the end and taking out as many people as possible. I really liked it for that. And I think the issue with Argyle 2 is that it is a Henry Cavill spy movie where Henry Cavill's in 5 minutes of it, versus here where it's very much still an ensemble movie in this case, but Henry Cavill is the lead character of the ensemble in a way that he's just not in Argyle.
Gotcha. Cool.
And he doesn't have a dumb haircut like in Argyle.
There you go. Any other questions or anything from you, Kim?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Then, Logan, take us over then to Monkey Man.
Yeah, so Monkey Man's my favorite movie of the year.
Nice, okay.
I think Monkey Man is a near masterpiece. And especially, and I would recommend it enough to both of you to please watch. Everyone watch Monkey Man. It's phenomenal. It, I think, is sort of like unimaginable that this is Dev Patel's directorial debut. Like, it's just kind of incredible that this is his first movie. I think like the level of polish and like craftsmanship put into it, and like the attention to detail and the way things are framed, and the way that he sort of an opposite tract of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, the way that he allows beats to linger and to stop and to slow things down to kind of absorb what's just happened, is kind of brilliant and kind of insane that someone in their first directorial effort is doing it. There are a lot of comparisons to John Wick, I think people are hearing for Monkey Man. And while those are not incorrect, I think they're sort of cheap and easy comparisons to make, right? Like, this is probably more for Cameron, but like, this is way more of like a Hong Kong action film than it is a John Wick action film. It is way more of like South Korean action cinema than it is like East Asian action cinema than it is American John Wick style film.
So we're talking more like Raid 2.
Yeah.
Like level of action. I see. So it's not. So it's messy. It's gritty and it's messy. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
It is the raid in particular. And Dev Patel's in a lot of interviews about this, where he very much compliments John Wick, but it's very much like the raid was a massive inspiration, right? Like other like Hong Kong action cinema, like of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, are huge inspirations, right?
That makes more sense.
South Korean action cinema is huge inspiration, right? And then obviously like some Indian cinema, but like
I think the suit threw people who were like, oh, John Wick, right. Indian John Wick, and it's like I never got that from like the action scenes we see in it, especially a lot of like the like kitchen fight scene. The kitchen fight scene reminded me a lot of the Raid 2's kitchen fight.
Yeah, it is. So there's a scene that is straight up pulling very heavily from the Raid Part 1. And I think, it is a very dirty, grungy, filthy movie. It is very, very, and this is the one thing which maybe should cover his ears, it's very bloody. But I
have already opened in another tab like the parents guide from IMDb that goes through like the violence and levels and stuff.
It's extremely violent, but I think it also, he knows when to cut for a good amount of the violence, but it is definitely very bloody. One of the things that, and again, as an action film, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal film. But the best parts of the movie for me actually are all of the other stuff. It is very political. So much so that that's part of the reason why it's in theaters, because originally it was going to be a Netflix movie, but they didn't like how political he was making it against kind of, it is very, I thought it's not the BJP and Modi, but it's very much the BJP and Modi, right? For like right-wing Indian politics stuff.
The story I had heard was Jordan Peele liked it so much that he basically bought it to make sure it had a theatrical run. And which became like a producer, and maybe it was a joint thing of like Netflix was like, that's fine, we didn't really want it on Netflix anyway.
I think if I recall correctly, Netflix was going to bury it.
That's exactly right. And then so came in and like watch it and be like, oh, this is phenomenal, I want to be a part of this, right?
So let me ask you a question: is this like, I can't imagine Dev Patel is like pro Modi Hindu nationalism, so I'm guessing it's very anti-Hindu nationalism.
Yes. And
that's fascinating.
Very, very much anti-Hindu nationalist. Like the main villain is like a Hindu prophet, preacher kind of guy.
Fascinating. So between this
and corrupt police and
oh wow, so between this and RRR being South Indian, not not within the reigns, anti-colonial for sure, but nothing everything about it was missing Hindu nationalism in it. And so didn't stop Modi supporters from claiming it, but then the director's I'm literally part of a culture that you guys say doesn't qualify as being Indian filmmakers, so screw you.
I mean, I would go this is very much just an anti-Modi, anti-right-wing Hindu nationalist film.
I love Dev Patel so much. He's such a great oh god.
There's a part which I don't want to spoil too much because Cameron, I think, will actually see
I'm gonna see it now. This sounds so good.
There's a part where after a major event happened in the movie where Dev Patel's character basically goes to rehab, and he rehabs with a trans community that's hiding out in a abandoned Hindu temple site, and the way it deals with the trans community in India and LGBTQ issues in India, and its reflection of poverty and corruption and Hindu nationalism, and the flashback sequences back to his own childhood trauma. It's incredible how well put together the movie is, I think. And it is easily my favorite movie of the year. If I want to watch it again, and when I watch it again, and if it all still sticks in the same way, I think it might be one of my favorite movies, period. I mean, it's just such a achievement of what he's doing, and you get such great performances from a lot of the cast around him. In particular, the leader of the trans community that Dev Patel is with. It gives maybe my favorite performance of the entire movie. The performance is so great, and the Batman Begins-esque like mind trip that they go on, but done in a way cooler manner. Not that Batman Begins is not cool, is just like incredible, right? Like the conversations they have and the like things they explore and like the real world footage that Dev will like cut in at times. It's very dark. It's very bloody. It's very dirty and grimy and a grungy kind of action film, which again, as someone who loves Hong Kong cinema like I do, and I know Cameron does, it is a movie made for us. And then you got one of the most beautiful men in the world in it, in Dev Patel. And there's a great scene that got some like traction on Twitter where like Dev Patel like takes his shirt off, people like catcall, like some of the members of the community like catcall at him, and it's like I love that Dev Patel put that scene in of him just getting catcalled in the movie because he's just so hot right now.
Nice.
And like its incorporation of music and like traditional Indian music in particular at like key moments. It's just it's incredible.
I'm just so excited to watch this movie now.
Yeah.
Especially when you're like, it's like The Raid. I was like, okay, like Raid 2, like I saw the kitchen scene and you're like, no, like The Raid 1. I'm like, oh, so it's dirty and nasty in its violence. And not in like a way that's like extra gory, but like The Raid, for Trevor has no idea, no concept of this.
I have the film context of the Raid movies. I've not like watched them, but I know how influential and how I know the style that is being referenced there.
Well, the Raid 1 is they're going into like a dilapidated apartment complex, and the Raid 2 is much more polished, going over like an entire city, so it's a lot cleaner. The Raid 1, like the violence is just gritty, dirty, and nasty.
Yeah.
And like one of the big scary bad guys is literally just like a just gross looking human being.
Yeah.
So
it's great, and I like that it is a self-contained story, right? Like there certainly could be monkey men movies after this, but I don't think there will be. And it is just like, I like that it's just like it's a self-contained story and it ends, and the like trail of like destruction, but also like I think release from the pain that his character has been holding on to throughout the entire film and throughout the like years since kind of the incident in his childhood. It's just very like cathartic to watch, and I think very like beautiful visually. It sounds great, and it's just like a very powerful film. And so I think it's incredible. And I think that yet again I watch Monkey Man, and I just I plead that they please, Trevor already knows, that they please make Dev Patel the next James Bond. Like, please. And like, I understand he's given interviews during the promotional tour for Monkey Man saying he doesn't want to be James Bond. He wants to be Monkey Man. You can do both. You're very talented, Dev. Please, like, don't deprive of us.
Dude,
Barbara,
after Daniel,
Michael.
I don't know if they'll ever get anybody to agree to be Daniel or to be James Bond after like how much Daniel Craig publicly hated being James Bond.
This is the thing though, but like I think they will, because it's James Bond, and so it's just like you're basically set for life, and it's just like an incredible role. And B, like, while Daniel Craig hated James Bond, as did Sean Connery. Roger Moore liked it a lot. Pierce Brosnan liked it a lot. So you're batting like about 500. So it'll be fine, right? Like, Daniel Craig also strikes me as someone who it can be a little
surly,
temperamental at times.
I think Daniel Craig didn't want to be the franchise guy.
Yeah,
like he signed on, and then like it was like, oh, this is not the kind of movie, like, because he loves being like, Logan Lucky. He loves and like Knives Out is, I guess, maybe the exception to the franchise rule for him, because he seems.
But even
to really
that was going to be a one-off
that.
at first.
But
right?
he's playing such a character in that versus like Bond.
He's an eccentric actor, like he really is.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna say, that I think like that's like saying, well, they're never gonna find somebody to play the Doctor after Christopher Eccleston had such a terrible one season with it or
That's
something
fair.
like that. It's like,
That's
no,
fair.
they'll find people who just gel better with the process,
which
and
is
with the style
exactly what
and
happened,
it
right?
is.
In David Tennant, right? I mean, I think not to make this podcast about James Bond, but
well, you're on it, so eventually it will devolve into that. Eventually,
yeah, but like
all roads lead to Bond.
All roads lead to Bond.
I think that for me, right, and I've made this pitch a lot, especially with Monkey Man on my mind, but like I just think, we're at the point now where we've had 6 years of James Bond. We're at this point in the series evolution where I think we are at a real like crossroads of where we can kind of go next, right? We had a 6-year wait between Spectre and No Time to Die. We're going to have probably close to a 6-year wait between the next movie because they just are just fiddling their time to give Daniel Craig time to, grieve as no longer being Bond now, right? And so we're in this moment where like we should do something different, I think, right? And it's not to say that, Henry Cavill or Aaron Taylor Johnson or whoever else it might be that's just a white guy from London couldn't do a great job in the role, and I wouldn't love his movies, right? But why not do something different, right? Why not do a story with, an Indian actor in the role, and you can kind of explore more of like what differences that would be, right? And like the colonial aspects of that, right? And like a more working class aspect of that, right? Or like a black British actor like John Boyega, right? Like, even if you have to do someone white, which you don't, just to be clear, go in the route of like make basically James Bond Kingsman, right? Like make him be poor, working class in the slums of London, right? Like do something different, right? And I think Dev Patel to me is an actor that has the capacity to really do some fun things in the role of Bond and make it his own and make it different. And if he is never James Bond, eventually I'll be okay with that. But it'll be fine because there will always be stuff like Monkey Man and him just creating his own rules that are just so fantastic, I think.
I have two questions. One, a follow-up to this spin-off conversation. Going back to Warfare of Ungentlemanly Warfare, what about a Henry Golding as a Bond? I think we talked about him like when we did that Bond show. This has been
Bellevue's pitch, right? Yeah. This has been Bellevue's pitch that he wants Henry Golding. So I like Henry Golding a lot too, and I'm not opposed to this as well. I think, again, actors who give us the ability to do different things with James Bond, right? Like, I think, to me, the actors who've been most successful in the role are those who have thoroughly made it their own. And obviously, Sean Connery got to go first, so you get to make the template, but also his Bond is so distinct and so rough around the edges, but also so refined and like kind of brawling. And Roger Moore, whether you like it or not, me and Trevor are,
firmly
I would
not.
say in the majority, but people disagree with us. But we're not the biggest Roger Moore fans, but he at least did it very differently. And then you get someone like Timothy Dalton, who me and Trevor both love, and who was just like maybe the darkest Bond,
just
even more
20
than
years
Craig.
ahead of his time.
Yeah, right. But like Timothy Dalton is so good and is so dark and like so kind of burnt out on both ends. And I think while me and Trevor and a lot of people of our generation really love Pierce Brosnan a lot, I think Pierce Brosnan is sort of underappreciated now. The critique he gets a lot is that he wasn't anything of his own. He was just sort of an amalgamation of all the Bonds before him.
I don't agree
and
with
while
that.
And while I don't agree with that either, I understand where they're coming from, because I think it's just him being great and making his own Bond, but like that's the critique he gets, and Craig is something distinct, right? And so give the actor the room to really explore and do something utterly their own. And Dev Patel, I think, is capable of that. I think Henry Golding's capable of that. I think Henry Cavill is capable of that. My issue with Henry Cavill has always been two things. One, at this point in time, he's too old to be James Bond, unless they really want to pick up the pace that they make these movies at, right? If they're going to sign Henry Cavill and say, great, we're going to make 5 movies in 5 years, and we're going to just start knocking these out like it's Lord of the Rings, sure, you can do Henry Cavill, but like the man is in his 40s. By the time they make the movie, he'll be in his mid-40s at least. Like, they probably want an actor they can lock up for like 10 to 15 years, right? And he's just not going to do it. The second reason it's not going to be Henry Cavill is, do we really want Henry Cavill, right? Like, this has always been my point. Do we really want Henry Cavill to be James Bond, right? Because when you think of Bond, a lot of people say, that's Henry Cavill. Like, that's the image they have of James Bond in their head is who Henry Cavill is. And to that I say, but is that interesting, right? Like, is that interesting to get, like, the guy you imagine to be James Bond? He's so Bondy, and look at him. And it's like, yeah, but, like, I don't know. I think that's not as much fun as someone who doesn't seem like he'd maybe be a good fit for Bond, and then does something totally different, right? Like Ian Fleming famously hated the selection of Sean Connery. That worked out pretty well, right? Like the internet lost its mind in 2005 over Daniel Craig. That worked out pretty well, right?
Blonde Bond? No.
A blonde, blue-eyed Bond? Oh my God, right? And so it's like, I think, Henry Cavill is such an incredible actor, but I don't want him to be James Bond. I want him to keep doing the weird things he's doing, and also I want Bond to do something riskier than cast Henry Cavill to be James Bond and be like, that's him.
Honestly, I just want Henry Cavill to make his Warhammer 40K
I was about to say,
movie.
I was like,
I'm never going to see it, but I want him to make it because it seems like that would make him very, very happy.
Listen, he's at a point now in his career, like you mentioned he's too old for it, but also like he's too attached to another project. The Warhammer 40, he's the executive producer of the entire thing Amazon's going to be rolling out over the next like 10, 15 years. Like, he's not at all interested in being Bond. And like, Argyle's the closest you're ever going to get to it. So
yeah, and this is also before we even get into like the logistics of the fact that like, why would Barbara and Michael Wilson want Superman to be James Bond, right?
Exactly.
That's not what they want. They don't want someone who you want to talk about expensive. Henry Cavill would be the most expensive James Bond they could possibly cast. Why would they do that? Why would they want someone who's Superman, has all that baggage, can be James Bond? They don't want any of this, right? Like they want someone they can make a blank canvas.
My only concern is I think Dev Patel might be too old.
Dev Patel's only like 32.
I know but that to me is, I feel like when you talk about, okay, we're going to do a James Bond again. Okay, cool. I need somebody young. Young. That's
the thing, though.
Dev Patel, 34.
Yeah, so that's the thing, though.
Dev Patel and I are the same age. That's why I'm like, I'm too old to be James Bond. I think
that's
he's
the thing, though.
Cam, is that there's a lot of factors that keep you from being James Bond.
No, I'm just talking about like from my perspective of like age. I'm not British. I'm fat, overweight. I have arthritis. I have a bad back. I've broken my ankle twice.
But yes, age is the factor.
Age is the one thing we have in common, okay? And that's the one thing that I think is a disqualifying factor about Dev Patel. Everything else about Dev Patel is up there as being pristine and great.
So it's not, though, because the one thing, to wrap up the Bond thing, because we've got derailed here, but the one thing I would say is, in James Bond's case, it's not the case, right? So Sean Connery was the youngest Bond when he was cast, not Ken Lazenby because he only got one. And Connery was 32 when Dr. No happened, right? And he was the youngest by like 7 years, because Craig was like 39 or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Craig, I just Googled it. Craig was 38 when he started as Bond.
Yeah, and so all the other Bonds were in their 40s, right? Because the whole point of Bond is that he has been through stuff, right? Like he served in the Navy, right? He got to the rank of commander, right? He did these things. And so it wouldn't make sense if Bond is Tom Holland's age. Well,
unless they're doing unless they're doing a Bond origin story or something like that.
Right. But want someone
I could absolutely see them doing that to set up like the next phase of Bond.
That's what I was. We're
gonna be with Bond from the beginning of Bond.
See, for me, I would like to see Bond after he gets out of the Navy. I want to see him. I want to see him when he gets into the spy work. I want to see a wet behind the ears spy Bond in a modern setting. Like, what does it look like in a modern,
we don't need to go down this rabbit hole because you're going to end up finding, well, everybody wants a different thing from Bond. Go ahead, finish your point, Logan.
At the end of the day, Bond is built to be a man in his 40s fantasy.
The only thing I was going to say for to Cameron's point and to Trevor's suggestion of what to do is that that I would argue we just got that. Right, I'd argue that's exactly what we just got from Daniel Craig. Right, I'd argue we got him from literally before he was a 007 agent, all the way through his entire arc, despite the fact that he quit or retired in every single movie. We got him his entire run, and we had that, right? And so
because we never get Spider-Man getting bit again,
right? But my counterpoint is that that was cool because we hadn't seen it before. And while the Bond community as a whole is not in charge of making decisions, obviously for a lot of reasons, but the Daniel Craig era is divisive, both I think among Bond fans and also just larger audiences. He's very popular, but also his 5 films literally exist outside the continuity of everything else, but also just exist thematically outside of everything else, right? Telling these serialized stories that flow in each other so so much is very different than like, because Connery's films are all sequels to each other, but it's not as important for the most part. And then after Connery, they don't matter at all, right? That's the whole point. And so do they want to do that again? Especially as you start to see franchises try to do what the MCU did and then it not going as well. Now the MCU struggling with it. And so my whole thing is that I would not be surprised if the next Bond era is a more, you know, one-off movie kind of thing and less tied together. And if it is tied together, I think it'd be more akin to like the Connery tied together run than it is to the Craig tied together run. Sure. But that's a long way of saying Monkey Man is really good.
So you
should all go watch Monkey Man.
One last, like, circling back to Monkey Man, one last question I had for you, because one of the other reviews I've seen of Monkey Man talked about the idea, and I'm curious, effectively, if like you share this sentiment. They basically said like, great film, but Dev Patel's first time directorial debut kind of shows a little bit in that maybe there are some things that could have been cut. Maybe 15 minutes could have been cut out of the movie, but he left it all on the screen. He didn't want to kill his darlings. Did you have any sense of that, or like you were in for the ride for everything that was there?
So I was in for the ride for everything that was there, but I'd also, I mean, so I think that, yeah, that's what I thought. The movie's under 2 hours long. So I kind of find it interesting that people would have that critique of it, right? I think, you know, I've talked about this a lot for movies and for video games as well. A lot of my favorite moments in stories are the quiet moments, right? I did a whole piece on this years ago, right? And so I think I don't agree, because I think those moments where he slows things down and lets things linger in a movie that's still ultimately under 2 hours long are to the benefit of everything else, right? Like, I like the fact that it lets you breathe and it lets you absorb what just happened, right? And it has kind of these explosive bursts of fighting and energy, and then it settles down again, right? And it has the flashbacks to the mother, right? And some people might not like the flashback stuff with him and his mom and like their village, but I think it's super important to underline kind of his modern day mission and also just how he got to where he is and who he is, right? And so I don't agree, and I honestly don't even know if I understand the critique, because the movie's not long. It's 7 minutes shorter than the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and that movie's flying by the seat of its pants. And so,
I don't think. I mean, I'm pulling it off of like I watched one YouTube video of the critique and of the review. I don't think it was. I think it was not that like, oh, the movie feels long or anything like that, but it was just in the same way that I always kind of do that, like, you know. God of War is like perfect because they edited it down. The 2018, not perfect because nothing's perfect, but like, you know, it is a great movie because they cut things that didn't need to be in there, and so I think it was that kind of sentiment of like, this is a great 2 hour movie. It might have been an extraordinary 1 hour 45 minute movie, or something. like that.
I mean, I guess that's totally what they can think. I mean, like I said, I think, you know, if I see this movie again, I would not be shocked for me to be like, I think it's just a masterpiece, one of my favorite movies ever, right? And so, I mean, I'm not there yet. I want to watch it a second time to kind of confirm that, but like, it's right there for me. And so for me, its length really worked. I think the elements that it kept in really worked. And I almost take the opposite track, where I'm coming at it from the angle of like, the fact that this is his directorial debut and this is what he produced is, to me, just incredible. Like, this feels like the work of someone 4 or 5 movies into their directing career, and not their first one when he would have been like the ages of like 29 to 34 while filming it, right? Because it took like years for this to kind of all come to fruition. And so I just think that it's incredible that he did this his first run at the bat. So I sort of take the opposite track. I guess, you know, that's the whole point of movie and art, right? Is that it's subjective, but I think it's
very much here's another opinion I heard, and I'm curious if you shared it. I love that you didn't. I think much so.
I think for me, if it was 15 minutes shorter, the movie'd be a little bit weaker. not on the action front, because I think they would have kept that in, but on the emotional front, I think.
Yeah,
so that's what I'd say.
It's also like an element that I don't remember this particular reviewer focusing on that you touched on that like seemed to really speak to you and seems to appeal to Cam is like the political nature of it and very much the overtones. I feel like the reviewer I was watching maybe doesn't have that context or didn't connect to that part of it as closely. So maybe that's what he's thinking he probably could have cut and and it wouldn't have impacted the film negatively. But if that's a key element, obviously for Dev Patel and for you, keep it in there. Absolutely. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you for your movie roundup hour here, Logan.
Thank you.
Let's switch over to games. Cam, you've been playing Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes for a couple weeks now because you got kind of the pre-release backer version. So yeah, tell me your thoughts on Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. I might chime in a little bit. I'm like a few hours in, not substantial enough to like I haven't gotten to like the base building components and stuff like that. So I'm still very early in the game myself.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a PS1 ass game on a PlayStation 5 that I've been playing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Holy shit! This game is a throwback to old ass game design, and I mean that in both the best and worst possible ways.
I've definitely been noticing that in the worst ways.
Yeah, things you brought up to me. You're like, hey, quick question: why is this happening? And I'm like, I don't know, because you're playing on an Xbox, right? I'm playing it on PS5. I'm not encountering that, so I don't know if it's a bug. But I also noticed that if somebody was just like, if the by the way, this is mentioning when you have somebody's dialogue box loading up, if you hit a prompt like the confirm prompt, it will auto like play to the next segment. I noticed that if somebody's only like word they said was like what, and like they finished saying it at the same time that I hit the prompt, it would skip to the next one.
No,
but you're noticing with like considerable longer ones.
In my case, if somebody if an NPC has like 3 text boxes worth of like text they're going to talk to, if I like the first text starts and is like it's going to be 3 lines of text, if I'm like halfway through the first line, I push the button. I'm expecting it, based on every other game I've played, to fill in typing out the text and just give me, okay, here's the full list of text. I can read faster than the game is typing. Just let me do that. But no, it just skips on to the next box. And so if I accidentally hit it twice, boom, I'm already through this person's conversation and didn't see anything they said. And can't go back and get that because that was a first time you talked to this person only kind of dialogue thing. It's like, I don't like this at all.
Yeah,
but that's a very nitpicky, like just... Like, what the hell is this kind of game design?
And like for me, that's an example of the different versions of this game on different platforms have different bugs.
Yeah, sure.
Seems to be a bug on the Xbox version because I don't encounter that on the PS5 version. And from what I saw, people like I looked online watching some people do some like gathering allies and being like, okay, how do I find this ally? Oh, they're in this village. Stuff online where like that wasn't happening to them on the PC version. The thing about it is like when we're talking about old ass game design, I'm not just talking about like what we see on screen and like what you encounter. I'm also talking about like the like core background components of this game. One thing, autosaves only work. And that's something you encountered too, was a bug where autosaving wasn't happening when it was supposed to. Autosaving only happens when you leave a town hub for the main world and vice versa. That's when autosaves are happening. So if you are in the middle of a dungeon or in the middle of like this like long ass stretch of time and you haven't gotten to the save point and you die or the game shuts off or crashes or whatever, you have to start back at a save point.
Yeah. And like you can only save at a save point or at an inn in town. Like you can't save just in the open world.
Nope, you cannot.
In the world map. It's like, what the,
Another
like that. Yeah. The other big one that's gotten me, and then we can actually talk about the things you like about the game, is inventory. Like you're locked to 30 slots in your bag, and some of those slots, 6 potions equals 1 slot, or up to 6 potions equals 1 slot. But when I was like, oh, I didn't know I was going to have that kind of weird bullshitty restriction. So when I bought a bunch of potions and then got to a dungeon where like I'm opening chests and it's like, your bag is full. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean my bag is full? What? It's 2024. Why is my bag full?
Not you're over encumbered. Yeah. Your bag is full.
Your bag is full. So you have to get rid of stuff if you want this new thing.
Yep.
And I'm like,
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely old ass game design. And then on top of that also, and this is what I mean, like the background stuff, the actual like background, like the like mechanics of how the game is operating and running. So in old school PS1 games, random encounters were dictated by the refresh rate of how long, like, a character's moving across the screen, it refreshes as your character moves, and that tells the game how often an enemy encounter should be happening.
I did see PC ran into this issue, right?
Yeah. If you are running off of high refresh rate, for example,
they've patched this, but
they patched it. Yeah, they patched it. But this is when I was playing it on launch, like, or pre-launch. I didn't get it. Like, I had to wait like 3 weeks for the first patch, because I got it so early.
Mm-hmm.
I got it almost as early as like reviewers got it.
I thought you were playing. I thought that was only affecting PC release though, and I thought you were playing on PS5.
I'm playing on PS5, but the refresh rate was across the board.
Oh, okay.
Because I was encountering the same thing. I'm playing on a 133 hertz monitor. I was getting little to no random encounters, especially in the overworld. Especially in the overworld where there's very little going on. And so there's very little to refresh. And so my refresh rate was, I was literally going 133 frames or like somewhere within that range before I got a random encounter. So I would get maybe like one random encounter on the overworld map between two, like traveling between two places. So like it is not, and it's not like I'm like, oh, well, like, because there has to be a balance. I don't want too few. I don't want too many.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not just tied to like the amount of steps you take.
I think I
feel like that's the more normal thing you would see these days.
These days, I think so. Like these days, I think there's a plethora of mechanics that you would use in programming it that you wouldn't use the refresh rate. But I think another thing about this is like what this game really is this is a love letter from essentially 4 core people who are part of the original Suikoden team to recreate an example of what a Suikoden game is to them. And so this is a very artistically led project. And this is so 100 Heroes is a Chinese tale about so this is like part of old Chinese literature where it is a story that they have been wanting to tell since like when they were looked at like the kind of stories they wanted to tell in Suikoden, 100 Heroes was always one of them, but it was always like 100 Heroes is too many people. How they've approached it and how they utilize it here, I think is really brilliant because not all 100 of your heroes are going to be like in-party member people. Some of them are going to be support people, like support characters that give you certain bonuses. So they travel along with you, but they end up filling in a like support role. For example, the innkeeper that from the first from your main town.
Yeah.
She's a support character, and what she allows you to do is she allows you to like change up your lineup at any save point. You should just be able to do that.
Yeah.
But like it locks that behind a character. This is a consistent like thing about it that's a bit frustrating. Another thing about it is that certain characters have certain prompts in certain dialogues if they're in your party for certain stuff. And you're like, oh, well, that'd be cool for replayability. But honestly, it's not enticing enough for it to be like a replayability factor. And so it's just a bonus trivia. Another thing also is that I feel like there could be better, especially with the main character, Noah. I love the characters that are in this game, but Noah feels oftentimes like he's too measured in his responses, which is weird because you think, oh, this is your main character. You want him to be loud and brash. But there's certain points in this game where like he encounters some very difficult things first, like in his character development.
I mean, like I don't think it's a spoiler because it's the first few hours of the game, but like his town just burned down.
Yeah,
and he was screaming through that. So like I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the further context of the game, but like that's the thing that's like fresh on my mind right now is like, oh, I thought he was responding very appropriately to that sequence.
It's how he follows up after that like his interaction with another character you'd think is like, wow, this is a massive like personal moment between these two characters. You'd think that Noah's character like would be based off of his experience in his village and like this other character's knowledge of everything that like the other character, I'm avoiding spoilers here, that Noah's reaction to that character's actions would be a lot more intense. And they're not. And it's weird. Because this should be like a breaking point between these two characters. That should be like a curse you, but your like inevitable betrayal moment, like should be there, but it's not. And instead he's like super measured about it. And you're like, I don't know about this choice. That being said, want to give a massive shout out to the head of the team who passed away during development. A lot of it was his vision. He was the original creator of Suikoden. I'm trying to recall his name. I don't have it pulled up right now. Do you have it pulled up, Trevor?
Was it Yoshitaka Murayama?
Yeah.
Okay.
Murayama's son. By the way, massive shout out to Jess Howard, who went to Japan and talked to the team. There's an article up on GameSpot where they talk about kind of like the legacy of their original leader and like what it meant to finish this project after his passing, and kind of see like the people, like, it was an interview done pre the release of the game. And so it gives a very interesting look and aspect to it. And it's like, well, why is the game this way? Like, why are these design choices here? And it's because this is very much from a artistic, like an auteur's look at, this is the game I want to make. These are at their core team, the 4 people who like kind of put together the studio, got everything together, and then did the Kickstarter later with a larger team that they recruited. This is very much their game. This is the game that they wanted to make. The game that they made is the game that they wanted to see. And it's them bringing their artistic vision to life. And so there is an aspect of that I really respect. I deeply respect that. I deeply think that there is a level of consideration to take in with that. The fact that they very much boldly proclaimed this is going to be an old ass RPG game. And so if you've been wanting that, this is it. If you have never experienced that, you're too young for it, for example, this is a taste of what it was like, but this is it within like a modern context. And so I think that this is such a weird combination of different factors that has led to this game basically being what it is, which is, it is what it is. It's an old ass RPG with old ass RPG restrictions and mechanics and stuff that prior to this would have been like, oh, hey, we're getting around the limitations of our system by having these support characters who let you do these things that otherwise we only you be able to do at certain other points. Like maybe that would have been a consideration back in the day, but now it's done for flavor and done for style and done for the context of this. We're recreating these old ass systems, even though there's no longer the technical restrictions that require these old ass systems. And so it brings up like, okay, and this is now becomes a conversation about game design and a conversation about like the artistic vision in game design and how you want like, and we're not talking about like art style game design. We're talking like the actual coding, bare bones structure of making a game. And I think that is something that's very special and very unique. And I think it's a really cool conversation we've been able to have. That being said, it was plagued by bugs, so people who were reviewing it or who got backer copies like me had to deal with. And the thing is, it's not like it was littered with like a bajillion bugs. It's not a Bethesda game with its level of bugs by any means, but it is like really restrictive bugs that are really bad. So like very large bugs, but not littered with like a billion of them.
Yeah, I mean, like I jumped into this. I've played like the first couple hours of like Suikoden 1 and 2 back when they came to like PlayStation Classics, and I could basically pick them up and play them a little bit on Vita. And I picked them up to check them out after like Jared Petty would rant and rave about them on like Podcast Beyond and Kind of Funny Stuff. Like I enjoyed enough, but I definitely got to a point where I was like, this is just overwhelming. So I remember checking out Eiyuden Chronicle Rising a few years ago and being like, oh, this is interesting, not what I was expecting from this as like the, precursor game that they, made tied to 100 Heroes. But I enjoyed it, finished it. And then so I hopped into 100 Hero on Xbox Game Pass. And yeah, in addition to kind of the gripes that we've already touched on, it just feels like an old game that it's like, no, that's like what you should be doing is making that style of a game, but like embracing the improvements that we've seen in the last 25 years of game design and game development. You can still have like the throwback art style and the throwback of, like you're going to recruit 1 billion characters, most of which you're never going to use. But you'll still have the option. Sure, throw that in there. But yeah, like some of these things that are just like, this is unnecessarily restrictive and like saps the fun out of it. It was, okay, I told you the other night, I was like, okay, I got to the point where I can now, like, I'm now the captain of the crew, and so I'm going to start going out and recruiting new party members and stuff, kind of past the little, intro prologue thing. I told you that, and then I went back to play the game, and the game had turned off and had not like, I don't know if they'd, like, pushed an update or whatever, but I basically sat down, and it was like, Xbox had to turn off the game, so you're going to have to, like, start it, load it new. And I'm like, okay, I'll load it new. Hopefully my autosave was, pretty recent. Nope. Had to go back like midway through the prologue bit, had to do that boss fight again, and basically lost like 45 minutes of gameplay just because like nothing had saved. Through like at the very minimum, it's like, okay, I finished that boss fight. Now as I go into this cutscene and like we're talking, and we've changed locations and I'm in this tavern now and they're telling me I'm going to be the party member, like that should have been an autosave point. Why was that not an autosave point? What was the weird rationality on that? So yeah, it suffers, I think, a lot because they are so beholden to that like historical, here's how these games work. But it's also like I've kind of walked away from this point and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna go back to it because I'm like, okay, I'm already at like 9 different party members, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna just keep using the 6 that I've got in my party. What is my incentive to change people out? I'm finally at a point where I'm comfortable with like this crew of people, and I know what they can do in attack wise and whatnot, and I'm just like, I don't like, and also they're now 7 levels ahead of the other people because they don't level alongside it, and
yeah.
I'm like, why?
Because some of the characters are real cool.
Too many of these party members is just like, okay, like I don't know, but I don't like, how do I know they're cool unless I pointlessly swap out and make my team composition weaker for a while to see that they're cool for maybe some random bit of exchangeable dialogue in a cutscene? Yeah, it's like
Oh, for me, it's because and this is really where that comes into it. Like, you haven't encountered this yet, Trevor, but there becomes points where you get like a character who is like required to be in your party.
Sure. Yeah. I see that. Yeah. At some points there's going to be like party requirements, but
which, by the way, you can also avoid those by making them auxiliary members of your party. Mm-hmm. So you add them to your party, but they're not in combat.
Yeah.
So there's ways around that. I like to keep people actively in my party if I can, but also because that mixes up things, makes me change my composition, and gives me that sort of a challenge, and I enjoy that.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're like, you want to do it that way, oh, this is a cool new character, they're required party member, cool. Well, they're short range, so I have to keep them in the front. Well, who am I going to swap out? How am I going to change this up? That leads to those aspects of it. And they do give you an out by letting you make that character now an auxiliary member, so it doesn't actually impact your combat proficiency with your party. So you can play it that way, or you can play it a different way. It's up to you. I think that that is a great like concession. But also, yeah, like there's some really cool characters with like cool designs that you meet, and you're like, I want you in my party now. And like, I'll see how it goes. I'm continuing to play it. I am just about to wrap up chapter 2. I have to recruit some more heroes before I could move on to chapter 3, but I also know there's a few more heroes that I can recruit. So I want to do that.
I don't have a sense for like the length of the chapters. So how many hours have you put in? Do you know?
Oh, I've probably put in like 12 hours, 13 hours.
Only 12? Like you've had this for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I feel like you like, I've put in like 4 hours.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. I've put in time into this game. I'm probably a little longer than that now that I think about it. Maybe 20 hours in now that I think about it. Because I was remembering a previous point where I was like, I've been playing this game for 13 hours and I've only got like 8 heroes. What's wrong with this? Like, what did I miss? So no, I'm probably more 20 plus hours into it. After my last playthrough with it, which was like a 6-hour playthrough with it. So yeah, I think my time's a bit warped on it. I haven't checked back in on it in a bit. I also haven't played in like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, the other gripe I have is that the boss fights just seem incredibly HP spongy. Like
where you're at now, yeah.
They all have like big boss fights in this have a gimmick where it's like, okay, this guy's going to shoot a cannon and it's going to hit like one column of your characters, so you can use the gimmick to like hide behind boulders and basically avoid, getting the attack or something. Or, another gimmick is they're going to use a crane that's going to drop a boulder. It's either going to drop on your team, or if you, use the crane yourself, you'll drop it back on the other team or whatever. It's like, okay, those are interesting enough gimmicks. These do not need to be 12 rounds of combat fights. If I'm lucky, they're being done that quickly. Like the fights seem unnecessarily like, okay, this enemy just has thousands of HP for we're level 10 characters. This is just taking a long time. I'm not doing anything different each round of combat. I'm just attacking, healing when I need to heal, and attacking again. And so I think there's
that changes as you
combat
get further
isn't
on.
Fun in this either right now.
Oh,
yeah, the or at least boss fights, like individual fights, it's like, okay, because you have 6 enemies and however many enemies they have on the field, and you kind of see up front, here's the order of operations. So it's fun trying to be like, okay, let me see if I can take out those 2 enemies before they even get to attack, and maybe I can take out all of the baddies before they even get to attack me. That's a cool, fun, like, tactical thing. But the boss fights, it's not that. It's just HP sponge, HP, like, just keep attacking, just keep hammering for 5 times longer than I feel like I need to finish this fight.
The last 2 bosses I fought are not like that. So
okay,
that does change later on.
Okay, this is a fun. Your camera has frozen in a fun position where you're just kind of like.
Me? Okay.
Yeah, you. There you go.
Yeah.
Now you're back up.
It's funny because your camera had frozen on my screen, like.
Cool.
So
yeah.
But yours is the one getting recorded, so all people are going to see is yours.
Yeah, yours is the one that just gets to look silly.
Yeah, no, I will say that it definitively changes, because there's one boss fight where it makes you think that is the case, and then it turns out it's not that at all. And basically it's silly and dumb, and I'm going to let you know right now, like, do not take that for consideration in like a later boss fight, because the game will deliberately try to trick you into thinking that is the case.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna get that far, but sure. Thanks. Anyway, I'm glad right now that I didn't actually buy this game and able to just play it on Game Pass, because it's been sadly a disappointment. And especially given like people's love and the like idea behind like, oh, I would love to play a modern day Suikoden. It's just hard to go back to those earlier ones, and the fact that they made an old ass game instead of making a modern day Suikoden is the disappointing aspect of it for me. Speaking of disappointments, unfortunate segue. My last the last thing we'll be talking about, and my game of the conversation, is Tales of Kenzera Zao. I played through this whole game pretty much in one sitting, Friday night going into Saturday, and admittedly that meant I was up until like 5 a.m. playing it. And it I played it because I wanted to see it through, but I stopped having a fun time with this game very early on. And it's unfortunate because I really wanted to like this game. For those that don't know, I guess to bring the audience up to speed, similar to I was bringing Logan up to speed a little bit before we started recording, Tales of Kenzera Zao is a Metroidvania EA original game. It was announced back at the Game Awards, so just relatively recently. It is basically being spearheaded by Abu Bakr Salim, he was the voice of Bayek in Assassin's Creed Origins, and has done a handful of other projects in that. But like that's probably his big like video gaming claim to fame. And he very much came out, announced the game, kind of got to show it off at the Game Awards, and really got a showcase kind of stage moment at the Game Awards to talk about the game. He talked about it as it's very much like an honoring of his recently passed father, and like that part of it comes through. Like the story of this game is you are Zhao, a shaman who's made like you make a deal with like basically the god of death, Kolunga, you're going to go around, you're going to collect and bring 3 spirits to him in exchange for bringing your father back. Your father died, like your character's like, he died too young. He shouldn't like, it shouldn't be like this. He should be with me kind of thing. I'm going to, it's that classic, like fighting death to like bring, a loved one back. So that's all great. Kolunga kind of goes along with you on this journey and is a very like measured. He's trying to be helpful. He's trying to like impart wisdom to Zhao, who just from the jump, like he's made the determination to do this thing, but he's immediately annoyed by how hard it is. It's like, did you think bringing somebody back from the dead was going to be an easy task? Like, and then he's constantly combative and just like a frustrating character that doesn't have like, he's too in his grief and blind to everything else. And I fully understand that like that can be how grief impacts people, but it doesn't read that that's how grief is impacting him. It reads that he's just an obstinate, foolish young child who doesn't understand the ways of the world. And like he's like Kolunga is trying to be nothing but helpful on the journey. He's giving his insight, he's giving his wisdom, he's doing all this. And he's just like, Zhao is just constantly telling him like, stop it. I need to focus. Stop talking to me. Let me focus on the task that I'm trying to do. And it just like, so from a character perspective, like that's a frustrating element where I'm like, I don't even like, I as a player don't even want to help you get to the end of this journey, because I don't think like, if your father could see you and the way you're acting and behaving, like, are you doing something that honors him? Doesn't feel like it to me. So like I was having frustrations there. I had frustrations with the gameplay in a lot of sequences where like it also, I think, I don't know if it's plagued with bugs, but it's plagued with some kind of like input elements where like, as an example, I'm constantly going into the map to see, okay, where am I trying to go next? And if I'm moving my character, if I'm like holding the thumbstick to move right while I'm in the map, and then I come out of the map, like the input gets dropped and I have to actively like release and like push to move again. So there were a lot of moments where like that kind of just like would end up screwing me a little bit of like, oh, something is coming at me. I jump into the map to, either clear a codex or something like that. But I'm like, I'm just going to keep moving as I do in many games of this kind. And no, you are just kind of stuck standing there when you come out of the thing until you have to basically move after you come out of the menu. It's not going to register that you were trying to move before you come out of the menu. Just weird stuff like that. But that also becomes a bigger problem in that there's seemingly some kind of finicky control stuff when you are doing like very precise platforming stuff in a sequence. And it's like, well, I pushed the button. I don't know why it didn't do the thing. Like I pushed the right sequence of buttons, but I didn't do the grapple hook, mechanic that I was trying to do or something like that. What happened? So frustrating elements on that. The game as a Metroidvania leans into an element that I first really encountered with Ori and the Blind Forest, in particular the Ginso tree, which I was telling Cameron about this. It's a sequence in Ori and the Blind Forest, one of its most notorious sequences, where maybe instead of a boss fight, or it might have been in addition to a boss fight, but basically like, hey, you now are doing a chase or escape sequence where you just have to do a lot of very precise platforming to get out of this tree as water is rising and flooding the tree. And you basically need to constantly stay out of the surface. And the problem with the Ginso tree and the problem that like Tales of Kenzera Zao has and doubles down on a few times is there's just like no checkpointing. So if you get 90% of the way through this sequence and then trip up or you miss the platform you're supposed to hit, or you don't see where you're supposed to go next, so the thing catches up to you and is like largely unforgiving, boom, you're back down to the beginning. And so there were like,
how long are the levels?
I mean, for these, they feel 4 times longer than they need to. Sure. For the one that like got me almost rage quitting in particular, it was an escape sequence that was probably 2 minutes, but that's 2 minutes of like very precise platforming while you're outrunning a cloud of gas or an evil enemy or something like that. And especially the last one in the game, you're having to use all of the different tools that the game has given you to this point. So you're trying to juggle like 6 different mechanics at various points. It's not just like, okay, let me jump here, wall jump. Okay, nope, it's jump, do the little glide down, then, drop down, jump out, like slide under a thing. I have the sequence memorized because I had to play through it like 40 plus times before finally nailing it. And so like that was a frustrating element. It has that. It also has, similar to Eiyuden Chronicle, it has very like spongy boss enemies and even some very spongy like regular enemies where it's like I played through most of the game on like the normal difficulty, and I got to the final of the 3 major boss fights, the 3 major spirits that you're collecting in the game, and just like got to the point where I was like, all right, I've died to this guy too many times. It's not that like it's not that I don't understand like the mechanics of this fight. I'm doing fine. It's that he has like a couple moves that if they hit you and there's so much stuff going on the screen and your character is so small in relation to that if you lose track of where your character is throughout the combat and you get hit by one of these things, you get knocked off the map and it's an insta kill. And so like there were a lot of elements at play where I just kept dying to this guy because of that particular like bullshit move that he has, that I was like, I was ready to give up and just quit at that point. And again, this is like 3 a.m, so I'm like, maybe I'll come back to it and try it again tomorrow or something like that, or maybe I'll just quit and be done with it because my time is more valuable than this.
Right.
So I quit. I Google, I'm like, does this even have difficulty settings? Because I didn't remember seeing if there were like accessibility or approachability options on the thing. And it's like, okay, yes, it does have a, relaxed mode. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to try switching to relaxed mode. Relaxed mode makes it way easier. I finally kill the boss. But then I go immediately into that like last of the chase sequences that I then spend 40 minutes just ramming my head against a wall on. And there's no difference in difficulty in the relaxed setting for that. There's no additional checkpointing or something like that. It's not, I got halfway through to a point where there is like a moment of breath before you have to start the next sequence. It's like, no, you just have to start over again. So like from the game just kept getting in its own way for like as much as I was wanting to enjoy it. And there is also just an element of like not enjoying the Metroidvania elements of a Metroidvania. I very early on was like, I'm not going to try and 100% this thing. So when you give me new functionality, it's like, oh, okay, now I see how I could have gotten to that, nook and cranny 3 sections ago. And I was like, no, I'm not going to bother. I have zero interest in backtracking any more than I have to. I'm not going to try and collect all the things. I'm not going to try and clear the map on this one because I'm just not having fun with it. There were a few like there are some platforming challenges where it's like, hey, yeah, you're going to get like a little trinket or something that you can equip that'll give you some extra little boon in a different way. And then there's some challenges that are like combat specific challenges, and I just wasn't having enough fun with the combat. Combat is probably the best element of the game that I enjoyed, where you are constantly switching between, you have a sun mask and a moon mask, and like the moon mask is like ranged attacks. You kind of get like a little firing thing. It has like you can, upgrade a skill that basically gives you like the quick reload, a la like a Gears of War thing of like, okay, once you've shot your 8 or 12 projectiles, you have to reload. But if you reload it, like if you push the button at the right time, you get a quicker reload and you can, immediately be back in the fight kind of thing. And then your sun mask is much more like melee combat focused and centric, heavy, like light and heavy attack combos and stuff like that. As you get like new abilities, you get like a sun ability that is like a projectile thing. So you can kind of have that. The moon abilities level up, like you can freeze enemies with like one of those projectiles. So if you make good use of that, and the switching between the sun and moon mask is just is like the R1 button or L1 button. So it's like just a quick button prompt, and there's fun to be had in, okay, I froze the enemy, but I'm going to do way more damage if I switch to the sun mask and do like a light into a heavy attack combo or something like that. Eventually I leveled up where like when I finish a combo with the sun mask, it ignites the enemies and they light on fire, and it does a little bit of sustained additional damage after the fact. And that ended up being very fun. But there are also some just bullshit enemies where it's like, all right, this enemy has shields and can only be attacked after it like rushes at you and basically gets, you have to jump out of the way, it hits the wall, and then you have to like do damage while it's stunned kind of thing. Like it'll reflect any projectiles you try and shoot at. It's like, well, that's okay. So I'm just having to do the same thing 3 or 4 times to let the enemy charge, and then go stun him, get a few hits in, dodge away before he, comes to, and then repeat 3 or 4 times. So yeah, it's like, I was looking at our kind of the old review scale that we had for that nerdy site back when we did written reviews. I would say, like, for me, this probably ends up being like a 6 or a 6.5, which falls into the like, it's a decent game. Like 7 is good, 8 is great kind of stuff. It's like, it's short, at least it has that, and there is an interesting meditation on like grief. I part of it maybe was like, maybe it is partly on me in that I was expecting Zhao to more go through like the stages of grief. But no, like he's mostly just stays in denial, has a few moments of like anger, but like, I mean, finally obviously comes to acceptance, spoilers, but it's pretty much what you would expect from a story like this, like at the end of the game, like basically after the final boss fight. But yeah, he just like there wasn't as much nuance to the character as I would have liked. And he ends up being so like needlessly combative that he was just frustrating. Like I really like, performances were good for what they were. I was just like, I don't like the character. I don't, as the player, I don't want to help you. So when you get assigned a quest to go collect 3 things, and Kalunga, the god of death, is saying, hey, I get that you want to collect these things to try and help your friend, but like she's too far gone. You should spend your time with her. And he's just like, shut up, I'm focusing. I need to get these 3 things. Like, it's like, I don't want to help you. So I'm going to take as long as I can to get these 3 things for you as the player. Like, I'm going to go on stupid little sidetracky things, or I'm going to go do a challenge that I, wouldn't otherwise do because I'm like spiting the character. So it was weird in that regard. But yeah, overall, like I played it. Depending on how much other stuff I play this year, it might eke into the top 10, but right now it's probably the weakest thing I've played this year. Just from both and it also, is also unfortunately having to stack up against the comparison of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is another Metroidvania that I played, earlier in the year, that didn't have any of these problems. Like, it felt great to control pretty much the whole time, and is like 3 times as long and kept me engaged and playing through it. I still didn't like necessarily want to 100% everything in that, but I almost 100%ed. I got enough to get the platinum trophy for that one. So like I was much more engaged in the characters and the journey of that one and the Metroidvania-ness of that one compared to this one, which I think just it has some good nuggets, has some beautiful art design. Like the art is wonderful. It has a lot of like beautiful colors to it. And it is doing a thing that I appreciate, where it's introducing me into what I assume is some sort of African mythology, given this like Kalunga god of death and some of the other spirits you encounter. There's a spirit of the sky, spirit of the land, spirit of mankind, basically. It seems like those are pulling from mythology. It very much, Logan, you'll appreciate this. It very much felt like how I kind of walked away from Raji, the ancient epic.
Yeah.
Whereas like I appreciate that I got introduced to this new story. There's a great codex in the game that kind of like gives you more about all these characters and like cool. Even the creatures and kind of the story of like what these creatures mean and symbolize and stuff like that. Like that's a really cool element of the game that I enjoyed. It was just more of a chore than I would have liked, kind of getting to a lot of that other stuff. But yeah, like going back to Raji from a few years ago, like that very much. I didn't like the gameplay of it as much, but I liked the story. I liked getting introduced to a lot more of the mythology, like the Hindu kind of gods and characters of Hindu theology in that. And so yeah, it was cool getting to see this, but it just, the game very much kind of kept getting in its own way for me. So I hope, like, I love that this was a passion project for this creative director who also voices Zhao and kind of is the main character, and kind of like built the studio for this game. I love that he got to have this kind of, journey and kind of his own dealing with grief of making this game for his father. And if they continue making games, I hope they have, I hope they kind of learn from this and improve upon it for future stories, whether that is like another Tales of Kenzera kind of thing. Because there's also the gameplay is all the Metroidvania stuff, but there is also outside of it the story you are playing is a story in universe by another character kind of outside. Like you start in like a modern day, or actually not even a modern day, like it feels like Wakanda-esque, and that is like a high-tech future Africa kind of city. You are a character there who has recently lost their father, and you're going through and playing through a story that the father wrote. And so like there's that little extra meta-narrative element to it, which was a weird thing. So maybe there are other Tales of Kenzera that they will, delve into, that isn't Zhao in this case, the character you're playing as. And if so, I'll certainly be interested to check out a follow up. There's another one I played on the PlayStation Plus Premium, I think is where it is, or maybe Essentials. I don't know what level, but if you don't have that, it's $20. If you do, it's free. So I just kind of downloaded it and played it. But yeah, it has the potential of a first thing, and maybe the future of the series will be better. There are interesting ideas there. I just think from a gameplay perspective, it suffers and gets in its way. Like there were times where I was so frustrated. I was like, I appreciate that you made this for your dead dad, man, but like, fuck you. And that was obviously a very like just frustrated gamer moment, more so than anything. But yeah, I was like, I wish I could have appreciated his journey more and not just been like frustrated by what felt like weak game elements or like a frustrating character development that you're trying to get behind and just is constantly annoying you. So yeah, I liked it, but I wish I'd liked it more. Is very much where I'm sitting at with this one. So those are my somewhat extensive, somewhat whatever thoughts on Tales of Kenzera Zhao. So yeah, I think that's it. Unless anybody has any questions or anything, we can go ahead and wrap up.
No, I think we're good.
All right. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining me to chat all this stuff. Let's go around our metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Logan, I don't think you're on like social media stuff anymore, but do you want to plug your Letterboxd if people want to go check out all those 900 plus movies that you've seen?
Check out my Letterboxd.
Is it Lefty Logie there too?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay.
I can double check that while filling air here.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I believe it is Lefty Logie there as well on Letterboxd. So you can go check that out. Lefty Logie. I've reviewed 34 movies so far this year. Go read those reviews. Sometimes they're short, quippy reviews. Sometimes they're a little bit more in-depth. You can go check out all the lists I've made of various rankings of series, including the crown jewel, the ranking of all the Bond films that me and Trevor did.
There you go.
My personal ranking.
Yep.
And then you can also go check out that D Plus show that goes live every Thursday, because I'll take one of theirs as well.
Every Friday, but yeah.
Check that out.
We record every Thursday.
We record every Thursday, it goes live every Friday. Eventually, we'll watch all the X-Men movies.
Yeah, we're talking about that. We're talking maybe a month of Toy Story movies.
The Toy Story movies as well. It'd be good.
Because we got that. So yeah, we'll see.
Never seen Toy Story 4.
You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Kim?
Yeah. Even though they're currently on hiatus, we have a massive library of Let's Plays. If you haven't ever checked those out, feel free to do so. You have these epic long series of Trevor playing through, whether it's Zelda games, Yakuza games, Baldur's Gate 3, the entirety of it. If you ever want to check those out, there's some supplemental stuff in there.
Skyrim, I did Skyrim.
You did Skyrim. Yeah, like Trevor's really done a lot of like epic long Let's Play series. I've had some other ones, whether it's Friday Night Dying Light or Jafo, Jedi Fallen Order. You can always check out some stuff from me. You have other stuff like the collaboration where It Takes Two, I believe, was Trevor and Logan did that.
Yeah.
Yep, we played through that one.
We have a plethora of Let's Plays of
Operation Tango.
So many different versions, so many different kinds of games. Go check those out.
Yeah. And there's a lot of standalone ones too, where it's like, hey, this is just a one episode of like this game, checking it out and seeing what it's like.
Me and Trevor did
we did a lot of Hitman
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to the echoing the Let's Play shout out, we're taking a break following Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, because that was a long one, and just I don't really have a ton or a new thing that I'm like, I want to sit down and do this as a Let's Play series for. But I will shout out specifically this last week's That D Plus show, where Cam and I sat down and talked about The Sandlot. In particular, that's a fun one because, hey, depending on when you're listening to this, The Sandlot might not be on Disney Plus. It has a tendency to come and go from the platform, but it was there now, and it's one we wanted to do for a while. So we sat down and took a look at that fun little classic from our childhood, and that speaks to, like you were saying, Logan, way back at the beginning, like, 2003, 2004 being like peak Logan years of watching stuff. 1993, like looking through some of the movies that came out that year and specifically around The Sandlot, it was like, oh, this is prime, like parents taking Trevor to the movies kind of era. It's stuff like Jurassic Park. It's stuff like the Super Mario Brothers movie, Last Action Hero. There were so many, like Robin Hood Men in Tights was in there. Like 93 was chef's kiss for movies that year.
24 movies.
Mrs. Doubtfire was another one from that year. So shout out to all of that fun stuff. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, once again, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.